Thank you for joining the final day of the UrbanX Summit. I'm Bernd Körber, head of Mini, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of our team, our companies, UrbanUs, and the entire BMW Group. Mini was born out of innovation and the desire to improve city life in a meaningful way. Following a fuel crisis in '59, the classic Mini, a small, economical and affordable car, was created as a clever solution to the mobility challenges of its time. The spirit of turning challenges into opportunity is foundational to the Mini brand and is what led us to create UrbanX, a mission-driven accelerator to support innovative startups working to make city life brighter. By partnering with a leading urban tech startup investor, UrbanUs, our goal is to run the best program for startups tackling some of our most complex urban challenges. We believe cities are at the heart of innovation, especially when it comes to sustainability and climate action. And in order to achieve net zero by 2050, new innovations and ideas that decarbonize our cities and modernize age-old industries are critical. Thank you for your interest, support, and commitment to brighter city life. I am pleased to hand it off to Shilpi Kumar, partner of UrbanUs, who will introduce today's speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernd, and thanks everyone for joining us today. 2020 and 2021 brought on a new wave of challenges, but it also surfaced ambitions to reduce the carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions that are so directly linked to our industries and lifestyle. Globally, we are seeing promising commitments made to reduce emissions from countries, cities, utilities, and all types of corporations, especially in the short and medium term. But so many of us are asking the question, what does it actually take to make this massive transition? 3 of our founders from Origen Hydrogen, Singularity Energy, and Dematic are working on important solutions that could get us there. I hope you'll find hope and inspiration in learning more about the work they are doing. As investors at UrbanUs, we are compelled by the role that each of them and so many others in our portfolio are playing to decarbonize the economy and fight climate change. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's conversation, Eric Wesoff, Canary Media's managing editor.
All right. Hello, and welcome to day 3 of the UrbanX Summit. I'm pleased to be your moderator for today. I'm Eric Wesoff I'm the managing editor at Canary Media. And the first of many plugs, please go to canarymedia.com and sign up for our newsletter. Let me give you a quick introduction to today's speakers. In order to meet our 2050 net zero goals and our ambitious climate pledges from companies like Amazon and Apple, new innovations that decarbonize our cities and modernize age-old industries are critical. And whether it be real-time carbon intelligence or green hydrogen to building electrification, you're going to be able to talk and hear from UrbanX founders Singularity and Origen, as Sophie Purdom from Climate Tech VC, as we discuss the technologies that empower us with the tools needed to tackle climate change. All right, that was the canned introduction. Let's jump into the meat of the panel. Let's talk to our panelists right away. And here's the first question. Tell us about yourself a little bit. Tell us about your company a little bit. We'll get into the details, but more importantly, tell us how you got here. Tell us, you're the leaders of your respective companies and you didn't get here instantly. It took some work. Tell us some interesting things about how we're all together on this stage, on this clean tech stage today. And we're going in some order. Sophie, you're on.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the UrbanX and Us team. I'm Sophie Purdom. Among a few other things, I write a weekly newsletter called Climate Tech VC. We're big fans of Canary as well. I think there can't be enough media in this important climate tech landscape these days. And what got me here? A few different angles, all of which had climate at its heart. So from policy work to ESG fund formation, through to starting a business myself called Kula Bio, where we make a sustainable fertilizer using microbes. I've moved from the institutional side of sustainable investing through to wanting to work on the solution side, which is where I think a lot of interesting conversations and actions like the one that we're going to be having today are happening. And so that's what got me into the venture capital side of the climate tech landscape. And I'm happy to say that I'm an active investor in that space and love to bring that perspective to the table with my friends here today.
By the way, Climate Tech VC is a great blog to read, and I say that despite the professional competitive jealousy I have with the publication itself. So read Sophie's Substack blog, please. Wenbo, tell us a little bit about your company and what brought you here. How did you get here today? Wenbo, mute. All right, so you can fill in your we can't hear you box on your Zoom bingo card. Wenbo, sound. All right, while we deal with Wenbo's technical difficulties, we're going to adapt and we're going to go to Taylor. So Taylor, same question to you. Tell us about Origen and tell us the miracle that got you here.
Thanks, Eric. And I'm not sure that it's a miracle, but I'm Taylor, co-founder and CEO of Origen. Our mission is to decarbonize tough industrial sectors, steel making, ammonia fertilizer production, longer term fuel for ships, semi-trucks, airplanes. We have a hardware product called an electrolyzer, which we believe is a breakthrough technology to dramatically reduce the cost of producing hydrogen. Myself, I'm an ex-oil and gas guy. Grew up in Oklahoma, lived in Texas. A lot of oil and gas folks in my family, going back to my great-grandfather, who was actually drilling wells in Oklahoma back in the early 1900s. Not quite in a covered wagon, but something you'd see out of the movies. And myself went into that industry, worked about a decade for BP, and then finally woke up to the urgent threat of climate change. And a bit late to the party, but I'm here. And before I left, BP was on their new ventures team looking at solutions in hydrogen, and then left 2 years ago to start looking for promising green hydrogen technology to scale up and commercialize.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for leaving the dark side and joining the right side. I have this vision of There Will Be Blood type of Daniel Day-Lewis oil exploration in my mind. I'll leave it at that. That's a good image. Wenbo, are you with us? Can we hear you?
Can you hear me now, Eric?
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
Finally, technical issue. All right. So a quick introduction of myself and the company that I'm building. So my name is Wenbo. I'm the founder and CEO of Singularity Energy. So Singularity is a carbon intelligence company that is providing the high quality actionable carbon data for companies to build the future of decarbonization services. So before founding Singularity, I was a postdoc researcher at Harvard Center for Green Buildings and Cities. So I have a research background in smart grids with over 10 years of experience. Always wanted to translate part of our research into a real world product. So that's why I founded the company. So the initial idea of Singularity was not actually on carbon. It was more related to the distributed energy resource management. But as we started to talk to real customers, we got a lot of questions about carbon, like how to calculate carbon in a more accurate way, and how can they really take carbon into the decision-making process so that they can make better decisions to proactively reduce their carbon. So that's why we made a small pivot roughly 1.5 years ago to focus specific on solving this carbon problem. So that's kind of like why we entered into this decarbonization space. Yeah.
So Wenbo, people didn't want distributed energy resource management. That doesn't buy you anything. They want the decarbonization, and that's what you're addressing, right?
Exactly.
Nobody says, I'd like to manage my distributed energy resources. That's not a
Right.
goal,
Right. That's not the end goal. The end goal is always about how can those technology help me reach my targets, and the targets are always about carbon, right? But if you look at the existing systems, they're still tracking your kilowatt hours, you're still tracking the cost savings, but it's not like the real metrics that they care about. Yeah. So that's kind of the gap that we're filling here. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. I'm not gonna tell you about my hero's journey, how I get here. That's a full webinar. We'll have to sponsor that in another session. I have been Taylor. I've been attempting to ignore hydrogen for the last year because I worked for a solar company before I worked for Canary, but I can no longer ignore it. There's too much money, there's too much attention, there's too much entrepreneurship and venture capital money flowing into it. And so can you give us the hydrogen for journalists or idiots primer in 3 minutes? Can you tell us why 2020 and 2021 have all of a sudden seen this surge of interest in hydrogen? Can you tell us what's the bubble part and what's the real cost drivers and why renewables are part of this picture? And can you give us, there are many flavors of hydrogen, and I know that you could talk for a day on the topic, but can you address it, dumb it down so that a journalist will understand it? Give us the hydrogen primer in 3 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. No. Thanks, Eric. And solar is a friend of green hydrogen, and I'm going to say that jokingly. But what's different now is the way of producing hydrogen that's being talked about is green hydrogen. It's taking water and renewable electricity, splitting that water to produce hydrogen gas, which is then a zero carbon fuel, heat source, electricity source, chemical feedstock. And a large portion of the input cost is renewables. And now that solar is 2 cents, headed even lower, the economics of producing green hydrogen look a lot different now than they did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, solar was 10 cents, and it never would have made sense. So it makes sense economically now. And in essence, it's a way to extend the power of renewables beyond the grid. It's transforming electricity into a product that's usable by many different industrial sectors. So it very much goes hand in hand with the major tailwind of renewables being built out and becoming cheaper and cheaper. And that's what green hydrogen is. There are other flavors, or more precisely colors, of hydrogen. Green hydrogen, it's renewable power and water. It's completely zero carbon to produce and to be used. There are ways to produce hydrogen using natural gas, which are not zero carbon, and that would be brown or gray hydrogen, which is the conventional process, or blue hydrogen, which is using carbon capture and storage, or turquoise hydrogen, which is producing a solid carbon waste product. But all of those processes using natural gas, that they still do have a sizable, or either quite sizable or moderately sizable carbon footprint. So the true excitement now is around green hydrogen and really extending the power of renewables beyond just the electricity sector.
But Taylor, it's early days, right? And so what percentage of world hydrogen is green today? 0? 1%?
You're right. 1%.
No, that's a great place to start. That's why you're a startup. That's why this is a new market. If it's 0%, well, there's only good places to go from here. But is that where we're at? We're basically at 0% today?
Pretty much, yeah. But there is a large pipeline of green hydrogen projects under development, led by the EU, and we'll talk about regulatory policy there. But there is a clear mandate to build 80 gigawatts of electrolyzers in the next 10 years, and there are projects being built and funded. So
I didn't mean to harsh your mellow with that zero. I mean, that's the stark reality of the situation. That's where venture capitalists want to be. They want to be at the cusp of the dawn of a market. Here you are. Sophie, you do a lot of things. You're a writer. You've been a lecturer. You've been an entrepreneur. You're Kula, I think one of your startups that you helped found just got funded. And you're also a writer and a blogger and who knows what else. But put on your venture capital market analysis hat. And Taylor just walked into your beautiful venture capital office on Sand Hill Road. That's a thing of the past now. But and tell us what you, as a venture investor, how you view the hydrogen world and the pitfalls that Taylor might be hitting.
Well, the entrepreneur always knows best, right? I can pontificate about the market and try to apply learnings from the past to it, but I'm a student here as well, and there are many folks that know the hydrogen market better than I do. So I'll lay out a few framing questions, I suppose, and I'll also say to the zero question, it excites me about how many zeros can be on the end of that number in the not too distant future, right? I think we're all looking at hydrogen as a booming submarket of climate tech. But anyway, back to the general framing questions. I mean, when I think of hydrogen, there are both the technologies on the production side, right? So your rainbow of colors, and the technologies like entrepreneurs like Taylor are bringing to market. But then it's also essential to remember that it requires a lot of back-end infrastructure for distribution and getting the end product to the point of consumption. So as with other energy markets, other resource markets, a lesson that I learned personally while starting the company called Kula Bio, which makes a sustainable fertilizer being a pure play commodity product, right? I learned hard that distribution really matters. And so I think as in hydrogen, right, the EU is not arguably leading here, in part because the government is backing in a pretty serious way the infrastructure for not only innovation, but moreover deployment.
Okay.
And don't all agree with me. I love being wrong. So please, Taylor, poke the bear.
in order for there to be for this to be a functioning ecosystem, it can't just be Taylor's electrolyzer that's working, right? There has to be an entire distribution and supply chain infrastructure, as well as appliance changes over the course of our lifetimes, right?
No doubt. Yeah, it's, hydrogen is clearly not a silver bullet solution, and the same could be said for many, many other climate technologies and technologies broadly speaking. But in particular, I would be quite bearish on the concept of a hydrogen car or hydrogen kind of like recreational vehicle versus I think the debate is really niche applications in existing industrial circumstances, whether that's distributed forklifts or niche business cases like that, versus hydrogen as kind of the new foundational energy source. And to me, that's the big debate, and where that question, like we said about zeros, at the end of the number starts becoming, is that 3, 6, 9 zeros? How big is the market that we're talking about here? Kind of comes down to that question.
Well, hydrogen doesn't, again, there's no silver bullet. Hydrogen doesn't have to decarbonize everything. If it can decarbonize forklifts and heavy fleet trucks, that's an amazing contribution. So for sure. All right, we're going to have to change the gears a little bit and move from the supply side and talking about Origen's move more to the demand side, and it's a neck whiplashing change, but that's where we're going now. So, Wenbo, we talked a little bit about Microsoft and Google's goals. But let's talk about this. And you've mentioned this to us in previous conversations. Tech companies are talking about 24/7 clean energy. And
Right.
I'd like you to help us understand if that's a greenwash, or if that's something that Google and Microsoft can actually do, or is there a bunch of renewable energy credit gamesmanship going on, or can your API and your software actually help companies like Microsoft and Google accomplish that formidable goal? So tell us a little bit about
Right.
the reality of 24/7 and how Singularity is working there.
Of course. So Eric, this is a hot topic right now in the market, because everybody is talking about 24/7 renewables, 24/7 clean energy. It's in the new infrastructure bill. So the reason why 24/7 is becoming so important, it's just like what you said. People have criticism over the existing 100% renewables using RECs as a way to demonstrate that. So they want to move beyond, accounting on an annual basis using certificates, but towards a real-time tracking system where you can actually prove where your electrons come from using contracts, right? Using, provable data, right? So this is a big shift towards a real-time tracking / management system that is essentially the same as how power system works. Because we all know the power system is a real-time system. You have to match the supply with demand on a real-time basis, right? So this is how companies are trying to, do the next level, sustainability. But it's a very, very ambitious target, because it requires a lot of technologies to really try to balance from both sides, right? It's kind of like you're managing a small mini grid or a microgrid yourself, right? So you need to match your consumption with your renewable supply. That might be solar, that might be wind. There are a lot of fluctuations, right? It's relatively easy for you to reach maybe 80% or 90% using, clean energy. But the last 10 to 20%, it's going to be super, super challenging. If you don't have like storage, for example, or you don't have certain flexibility from the consumption side to try to match the consumption with the supply instead of only matching the supply with the consumption, then it's never going to be possible, right? So that's why, if you see Google's pledge, their target is to reach 100%, carbon-free energy by 2030. So we still have like 10 years to go to fill that gap. So that's kind of like the reason why this is super challenging, but at the same time, it brings a lot of opportunities for technologies like what we're trying to build to try to solve one piece of the puzzle, which is like, how can you track the emissions on real time, and then utilizing better data and intelligence to manage the consumption, to enable a two-way balancing, so that you can really guarantee you're using 100% renewable or clean energy on a hour-by-hour basis instead of only on an annual aggregate level. Yeah.
Well, sure. And I again, cliches are useful because, well, they're cliches. But you can't manage what you don't measure, and here's a brilliant example of that, right? You can't
exactly.
But who at the company wants to see this? Is it the COO? Is it the manufacturing person? Obviously, it's the facilities person. But who's driving in the company? Who are you selling to? Who is the person who's really accountable for this?
So we're selling to, the end user is going to be the sustainability / energy team. So they manage the company's sustainability initiatives as well as energy systems, right? So those are the end user. But in order to get to the end user, we also partner with other energy service providers, such as energy system vendors, device manufacturers, EV charging companies, so that we can enable their existing technology to be carbon driven. Because today companies already are using a variety of different ways to manage their energy consumption to be more energy efficient, try to reduce their energy costs. So the gap is that they're not looking at carbon. They're only looking at kilowatt hour savings or cost savings, right? So there is a gap between minimizing for cost versus reducing emissions. So those are not the same thing. So in some cases, if you only optimize for cost, so there is a chance that you may actually end up with increasing your emissions instead of reducing your emissions, because the carbon signal is not always in line with the pricing signal, right? So that's why what we're bringing to the table is a carbon intelligence layer, so that we can transform the existing strategies into carbon driven, and we enable a co-optimized solution. We're not saying that we don't care about cost, right? We still care about cost, but we want to bring carbon into the picture so that you are not only optimizing for cost, but also for emissions. So one example is, our current, we have a pilot on Harvard Business School campus. It's a energy storage pilot. So, when we first did the simulation for the system, if you only optimize for demand charge savings, then you can actually increase your emissions because, as we all know, energy storage doesn't, generate renewable power. It only stores energy, right? So how much emission does this system create really depends on what are the sources of the power that you store in that energy storage or batteries, right? So by knowing, it could be, it could be clean energy. It could be dirty energy.
Wenbo, you could be storing coal-generated energy into your battery. I understand.
Yes.
I want to move on a little bit, but is your product purely a software thing, or are there sensors involved at junction boxes? Is that what you're talking about, or is it purely a software play?
So we are a pure software provider, but we need to work with other vendors in order to get the information from the battery, for example, right? So that's why I was saying, we partner with other companies in the ecosystem, right? We see ourselves as the backend or the enabler of other companies to enable them to bring carbon layer, right, to their services or to their products. So like, we're not making sensors, right? Like, we're not making hardware, but we work with those hardware companies and then to enable them to co-optimize for cost as well as carbon emissions.
Okay. Sophie, I'm going to go back to you because you're my due diligence program. You've seen. Not only do you track software startups, but you've probably done some due diligence on decarbonization and climate software startups. I'll assume it's a raging field because you don't need to build a $1 billion thin film factory to make this happen. You can do this in software to some extent. So it doesn't require the same type of CapEx that a hydrogen electrolyzer will require. What does that market look like to you? Is it insanely crowded? Is it hard to find a differentiation amongst these, or is there just a wealth of brilliance in this field?
You're right that obviously software is the trope that gets venture capitalists excited, right? Hypothetically, lower volumes of investment needed to reach a sizable outcome. However, I will caveat that trope and say that it's a trope and not a truth. And so my inbox is open to all hardware startups out there, and I think that the same is probably true of a vast majority of my peers in the climate tech investment space, and it's a lesson that was hard learned, bad pun, during the clean tech 1.0 boom and bust as well, where a majority of investment went into hardware businesses that the venture capitalists writ large were probably not the right folks with their high cost of capital to fund the startup from the lab through to ultimate kind of scale and deployment. However, lessons were learned there, and this is not the same time now in climate tech as it was in clean tech 1.0. We can go through some of those fundamental differences, but VCs are structurally set up now differently to manage those risks. And there's a lot of different partners along the way, including project finance folks, non-dilutive capital, the government itself, large corporate buyers that take appropriate stacks, apply appropriate capital stacks to maturation stages. However, software, everyone gets excited about that because there's less need for that CapEx piece that we were just talking about. So your question was kind of, what does the landscape look like here for what I would define as carbon accounting, carbon management, and I'm sure I'll come up with a third category as we get chatting here, but it is a hot topic.
Dashboard.
Say that again,
any kind of carbon. A dashboard, like a dashboard. Yeah, of course.
No doubt. Yeah. So in the carbon management and accounting space, there's a few different ways that breaks out. At a very high level, I'd say it's folks that are doing accounting, reporting, right? So for corporates and other organizations measuring what's happening today, kind of a la footprinting. There's some ways to innovate there with AI, machine learning, kind of like novel inputs and dashboards, but that's just factual at the end of the day. Like, what is the current state? What could the future state be? Then there are other organizations where I'm pretty excited about, they're taking that Trojan horse of coming in and helping with the data layer. They're taking that and then they're doing things with it, right? So they're making recommendations, helping companies take action. And then there's another stage of company where they're then queuing up marketplaces or working with companies to generate internal solutions. And businesses, early stage startups, of which there's a few, I won't name favorites, but folks that have gone from the data collection through to doing something with it and then generating a marketplace or something quite structural around that, I think are well set up to succeed here and also drive a lot of change.
Okay. So one takeaway I get from you is that this isn't the venture capital world that I remember from 2008. I'm only 25, but that aged me. That era aged me. But so venture capital and the entire venture capital and financing change is different today, right? I think that's one of the things you said, Sophie. And Wenbo, one of the takeaways.
Taylor and I was just going to say, I think Taylor and Wenbo probably hope so, right?
Of course.
Wenbo, one of the takeaways I got from you is that every company is now a microgrid operator to some extent and needs to think of themselves, might help by
they want to be
of themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They want to be like a microgrid operator so that they can control what is actually supplying to their facility so that they can, really prove that it's 100%, carbon free on a 24/7 basis, as I said. Yeah. And that's challenging.
Hey,
that's
Taylor,
really challenging, as I said.
That last 20% for sure. Well, that's challenging for the United States and the world as well. Taylor, I don't think you have to worry about capital raising in the next couple of years. Venture capitalists have given $2 billion to nuclear fusion in the last couple of years. Makes hydrogen a easy task to take care of. It's a walk in the park compared to nuclear fusion. I want to talk more about hydrogen. Tell us a little bit about electrolyzers. I know the word, I understand what it does, but tell us what the current state of the art is and where you're attacking this. I know you're going with membrane science, but again, give us electrolyzers for journalists or idiots 101.
Sure. And, first off, for everyone's fortunate sake, this is not near the science challenge of nuclear fusion. There are proven electrolyzer technologies, moving, storing, transporting hydrogen. It is, a very known, safe, proven process, and there's large industrial gas companies, in the conventional hydrogen business. So thank God we're not, trying to achieve nuclear fusion here.
And I assume these conventional hydrogen and gas companies like Air Liquide and et cetera are super excited and interested in different colors of hydrogen. And these are some of your potential industrial partners for sure, right?
They are. But if you look at existing electrolyzer technologies, there are clear challenges and impediments to reaching long-term cost targets. So, and what that is, what is the state of the art right now? There's only one technology that can pair directly with renewables and operate intermittently, turn on and off easily, operate autonomously, cycle, and that's PEM electrolyzers, proton exchange membrane electrolyzers. So that's the current state of the art. But the rub of that technology is it operates in highly acidic conditions. Thus, the box, all pieces of the box are built using expensive metals, titanium, gold-coated components, which is pretty extreme, and then platinum and iridium catalysts. So there's a clear precious metals cost challenge there, and a scarcity of metal supply, sustainability of supply chain concern, and that's what we're focused on, is having the ability to integrate with renewables, a simple on and off water-based system, but using materials innovation and catalyst and electrode innovation as well. We eliminate those acidic conditions, so we can build our box with stainless steel and common nickel and iron catalysts. No palladium, platinum, iridium, nothing exotic, nothing from asteroid dust or anything.
Okay. Fusion does need that, and I don't mean to make the.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Sorry about the zero comment and the fusion comment. I take it back. I take it all back.
You're fine. No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
Okay. I mean, these are the challenges you face every day. Go ahead, Sophie, please.
Sure.
I was going to say, Taylor, riffing off of that, right? Not only one concern I just heard brought up there that we're hearing a lot about these days is the scarcity of a lot of resources, right? Whether that's wood or I don't know, things getting stuck in a canal, right? Like supply chain errors and issues seem to be happening across the world right now, and one of those places is in raw materials, and particularly scarce metals, rare metals. Maybe we can chat a little bit about that, because there's some tie-in here as well, Wenbo, to tracking, right? And you're tracking electrons, but I think generally tracking of resources needed for the clean energy revolution is going to be a really hot button topic across the board.
Of course. I mean, just a great example is the battery revolution will continue as long as we have lithium to supply it, and as long as it's low-cost lithium, right, and it's not coming from nations we don't do business with, right? And so there's potential supply issues, even in something as simple as batteries.
Can I toss
also
out one more funny?
Good. Everyone yelling. That's perfect. Go.
I was gonna say, tracking the emissions due to supply chain is another big challenge in the carbon accounting space. Like today, we started with electricity because it's relatively easy for you to get consumption data, to get the fuel mix data, and then it's relatively easy for you to translate kilowatt hours into carbon. So the next big challenge, or the next big thing, for carbon accounting is really going to be the Scope 3 supply chain emissions, right? Because that's a whole complex issue, right? You need to track the source, it's cross-border issue, the opacity in the data. Speaking of tracking, that's another thing that came into my mind.
Totally, and tying it back again, full loop, right? Back to what we were just talking about with internal corporate tracking and those carbon accounting and emissions. That's another form of tracking. I'm really bullish on this theme of greater clarity and real-time insight into all sorts of supply chain challenges related to climate.
Taylor, did you have something to say?
Sure. No. To tag on that theme of it's important to track the inputs. but it's also important to track the outputs and to certify products as being low carbon. And the steel industry comes to mind. It's responsible for almost 10% of global CO2. And there's steel in the buildings we work in, the houses we live in, apartments we live in, cars we drive, subways we ride. And there's all these hidden emissions around us. And that's a use case for hydrogen. And really, hydrogen is the only viable solution there. But I think society will start to really focus on these more hidden and embedded emissions in all the products we use. The electricity and fuels are obvious, but there's a lot of emissions around us that we take for granted.
Totally.
Well,
and one more plus to that. Sorry, Eric. And then I'll
no.
shut up. One more plus to that, right? We're talking about this seemingly from a kind of do good, mission driven, like we're all true believers here, right? Of it should be, supply chain should be decarbonized, products should be decarbonized. But let's remember kind of why, right? Like resilient supply chains drive superior business outcomes. You get your stuff on time, your customers are happier, it's hypothetically a better product, right? Like there's a lot of business reasons why we're very focused here on the intersection of kind of climate and supply chain tracking and increasing transparency on inputs and on outputs.
In terms of hydrogen, I don't want, but one other topic simply is everything all the commodity food we eat is fertilized by fertilizers that are generated from fossil fuels, right? But so if you're talking about inputs and outputs, everything we eat in a restaurant has a fossil fuel fertilizer aspect to it. If that fertilizer was created with hydrogen, that would mitigate some of that food carbon bill, would it not, Taylor? So I mean,
yeah, no
it's
doubt.
not
I mean,
just
50% of our 50% of our bodies are made up of nitrogen from the Haber-Bosch process, right? Which is a technology that's been around for 100 years. And it's got a tricky history and two tricky guys, two scientists, Haber and Bosch, who invented this incredible technology for which they won 2 Nobel Prizes for. It took us from the brink of starvation as humanity, but then it also, on the flip side, arguably fueled the rise of Hitler and World War II because the technology was used to create explosives. And so there's difficulties to both sides, right? And the story lives on today. We still rely on the Haber-Bosch process to make a vast majority of our synthetic fertilizers, which, like you just said, Eric, are well above 90% of global, nitrogen fertilizer production. So maybe there's a plug here, Taylor, for your hydrogen production and Kula Bio's sustainable microbial fertilizer partnership in the future. So look out, Haber-Bosch process.
Well,
and using clean energy on a 24/7 basis. So it's totally clean, right? From the source to the end. Yeah.
I love it.
I think the Nobel Prize is indicative of the wry Scandinavian sense of humor, I think, to some extent. I think they also awarded the Nobel Prize to the person who invented the frontal lobotomy at one point. So keep that. That's a true story. Keep that in mind. Okay. So we're getting to the point, this went fast, where we're going to take some audience questions. But before that happens, I want to step back a little bit because you're all entrepreneurs. You're all in the midst of starting companies, or perhaps you've started and left companies, or seen companies not succeed in the past. So you've all encountered some obstacle and along the way. Can you give us a quick tale of a challenge that you met in your recent climate leadership role that you're doing, and how you dealt with it? I think it's an important question. I know it's not about green hydrogen, but we have entrepreneurs, we have investors, and we have. I'm looking for some inspiration. I'm looking of how you encountered the inevitable setbacks and how you're still here today. Sophie.
Happy to go first on failures. Let's see. So when I was in a similar seat to where these two guys are at right now, and we were out raising capital for our early stage deep tech academic spin out in climate tech a handful of years ago, when that was barely a term, I made the mistake of taking experience from management consulting, where there's an answer to everything, hypothetically, and I sold too much in our fundraising pitches. When the truth is that no one likes to know it all, and I didn't know the answer, right? And so a lesson for me was being more humble about not having all the answers, being confident in that, and being able to tell a story and flag the weak spots such that folks on the other side of the table felt a desire to opt in, raise their hand, and co-collaborate together, because really that's what we were looking for in fundraisers. And so now I've taken that lesson, and sitting on the other side of the table, that's how I tried to operate as an investor myself.
So I don't know is not the worst answer you can give to a potential investor, as long as it's a well thought out I don't know, right?
You bet.
For sure. Wenbo?
I think the biggest challenge. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge that I had in the past few years, it's really around, how can you translate some academic research into a, commercially viable business, right? Because coming from a research background, we tend to focus more on the technical side, like, the technology, the product, but sometimes, especially in the very beginning stage, we didn't pay enough attention to the customers. As I mentioned, the initial idea was really something related to my research. But as we started to talk to more customers, right, I think customer discovery is a key. It's really like, we learned all the good ideas from the customers. Like, they tell us basically what they want, what they need, and that led us to the carbon platform that we're building today. I think that's the biggest lesson for me. It's really like, listen to the customers, always make sure that you are paying attention to their motivations and what they're really looking for, not what they're saying from the conversations. Yeah.
All right. Good. Thank you. And Taylor.
Sure. Yeah.
Other than uncooperative moderators, what else have you?
I think this is the first time I've been on in a forum like this, so it's been fun. But along that same vein of being comfortable with saying I don't know, and having plans and looking over the horizon, but needing to be adaptable and flexible. I think a year ago it was much more difficult to convince folks that hydrogen really was going to take off. And it's an easier story now, but I think in general, entrepreneurship is about being flexible, saying I don't know, having plans, but being very quick to scrap them and go another way, right? And maintaining that openness and across, not only internally the team, but externally, and that's what also makes it fun, right? It's what makes it a challenge, but what makes it fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. As a sort of entrepreneur, I completely understand. So we have some great questions coming in. We only have about 10 minutes left. And so, whereas you might have been a little bit prepared for my questions, now it's in the, you're without a net, okay? And they're coming in, the audience is gonna be blindsiding you. So here we go. So from Adish on Zoom, question for Wenbo. How are you making this data available in real time? How are you presenting it back to the customer? What is the report? What is the data? What is the visualization?
Right. So the data we provide is coming from the grid operators or the ISOs. So the answer is that real-time data already exists. So we're not making up data. We're not a data source, but we're collecting the data that is publicly available into a platform that can show you the data in a clean, structured way. And also we give you the intelligence for you to really leverage that data to make better decisions, to co-optimize. Some examples might include using this data to charge your EV when the grid is cleaner, so that you can minimize your carbon impact. So we have another pilot demonstrating that we can automate the EV charging to minimize emissions by as much as 40%, just using software without using anything else. So that's kind of like how we can translate the real-time information into actionable insights to enable people to decarbonize.
Okay. Well, you talked about a carbon intelligence layer, right? And that makes sense to someone who thinks in terms of network stacks or things like that. So
yeah, I mean, data is a foundation. Yeah. Data is a foundation layer. Then it's an intelligence layer. Yeah.
Okay. There's a couple of questions that are complementary, but they're talking about big companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon are light years ahead of smaller or medium-sized companies. They have the resources to do it. So Wenbo, are you trying to make this easier for medium-sized or smaller companies to do this? Is that who
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Like today, this is kind of like something only large company can afford. And we're trying to standardize that. And then we're providing, cheaper, cost-effective solution to enable everybody, to democratize, 24/7 solutions for everybody. Yeah. That is definitely like one of the motivations why we're focusing on building a full 24/7 solution on top of the data that we provide. Yeah. It is one of the natural application of our platform. Yeah.
That's a smart question from the audience. Thank you, audience. Yeah. This is a question I don't think we're going to be able to answer it, but let's ask it. How realistic are the decarbonization commitments we're seeing? That's another webinar, but what needs to happen within corporations and governments for us to realistically get there? UrbanX, that's your next webinar topic. I don't think we're going to answer it in the 5 minutes we have. I certainly, as a journalist who's pitched every day by utilities, companies, and individuals on their carbon goals, yes, there is a lot of noise. And there's another question about how much noise there is. There is an enormous amount of noise in this, and that's why we need great journalists like the folks at Canary Media. Go sign up for our newsletter to kind of distill the BS from the facts. Sorry, I don't know how that plug got in there, but there it goes. Okay.
To that, real quick, Eric, I think there's a key question around a few definitions, such as, what does net zero mean? Let me know, right, audience or esteemed fellow panelists, if anybody has come up with that definition yet. But there's a few. Look, it's frothy, right? The market's frothy, the language is frothy, and rightfully so. There's more enthusiasm than ever pouring in here. I'd never trade that off for the frothiness. I believe that this will kind of settle out, redefine. There will be folks that have gotten way ahead of their skis and have to pull back on some commitments. But look, lots of these folks, lots of these companies making net zero decarbonization commitments, there's real teeth behind that, right? They've made this publicly, and they have shareholders, and those shareholders own stock and care about how management is operating. So I wouldn't be concerned about necessarily like defaults on commitments. I think this insinuates that there will just continue to be a large push of enthusiasm and continue kind of noise along the way, getting towards whatever net zero actually means. And that's where new solutions like we're talking about come into play. And it's also another plug for where deployment comes into play, right? So I think there will be more movement from other parts of the capital stack, project finance, government funding, et cetera, to really get us to net zero. But again, this part's fun, working on solutions together.
So whereas Sophie takes a very optimistic outlook on that, I have to add slightly that there is a lot of language and greenwashing going on, and we're certainly going to see, and I can go into more detail, but oil companies and fossil fuel companies are going to be on this decarbonization journey with us, or pretending that they are. And there's going to be lots of claims of greenish petroleum. That is happening today. That is happening right now. I'm in conversations with frackers who are talking about lowering their carbon footprint. And so, just be aware and look a little deeper than just what the claims that are being made. So I think we're close to the end of this, and we're sort of done with the audience questions have petered out, and so I think we're going to wrap it up. This went fast, and this was a slightly daunting conversation because we have Wenbo from at the top of the demand part, and we have Taylor, who's deep in the supply part of this. But we're all attacking the same problem, and it's great that we can talk together, even though we're at different sides of the elephant of climate change. And so I think that takes it from the Miriam and my overlords at UrbanX. I think we're okay, right? I think we're gonna end it here. So I'd like to thank the audience. I'd like to thank UrbanX. I'd like to thank our panelists, and I'd like to thank the people who sent in their questions. Here, let me read this. For any accredited investors in the audience, if you're interested in connecting with Origen Hydrogen or Singularity, please contact them through www.urban-x.com if you're an investor, or if you just want to buy some of their product. I think they'll be glad to hear from you as well. I'd like to thank Sophie Purdom, who helped me in my moderating duties. She's on the cusp of well, I don't want to leak information, but stay in touch with her, read her blog, and follow her entrepreneurial and investment career. And so on behalf of Canary Media, UrbanX, Mini, and Urban Us, thanks for participating. Stay tuned for the launch of UrbanX Cohort 10. I think we're talking to Cohort 9. Is that right? You're Cohort 9. Is that right?
Yes.
Guys?
Yes.
And sign up for their newsletter. And this isn't my words, but stay safe and be excellent to each other. So thank you very much.
I love that.
And thanks, everyone. I feel that way too. Be excellent. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Taylor. Bye,
Thank you.
Wenbo. Bye, Eric.